Welcome to Anatomy of Failure, the podcast where we lay bare the bumps, bruises, and broken bones of business ventures gone awry. I'm your host, Ivy Walker. Let's face it, nearly half of all businesses crash and burn in under 5 years. But you won't find many folks sharing that highlight reel or talking about the F word, failure. Here, we're not glossing over the ugly stuff. We'll dissect what it looks like when a dream begins to nosedive, talk about the emotional roller coaster when things go sideways, and we'll figure out how to fail like a boss, because stumbling forward beats standing still, and failing forward isn't just for the privileged few. Ready to dive in? Let's get honest. Welcome to Anatomy of Failure. I'm your host, Ivy Walker, and today we will be talking about one of the failure factors for why businesses fail, and that is the fear of failure. I have with me here today my guest co-host, Patrice. So Kali, thank you for joining me today and having a conversation about this important topic, the fear of failure. For me, it's been a long time coming and recognizing that it was something that I suffered from. And as a founder, as a serial entrepreneur, looking back and seeing the impact it has had on the choices that I've made with the businesses that I've started. So before we dive in, I wanted to talk a little bit about our background so that our listeners have a chance to kind of understand where we're coming from. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started multiple businesses over the course of my career. I have an ethics company that's been around for about 12 years at this point, 11 years at this point, and a staffing company that I'm in the process of winding down, which is how we got here to the fear of failure. And that company is about 5 years old. So, and I've got another venture that I'm sort of percolating right now that will replace the staffing company, but not my first time at the rodeo, but definitely I feel like this will be a different experience because I've learned a lot about myself with a company that is failing. So tell us a little bit about your background.
So, as you know, I'm a neurodiverse wellness enthusiast, and I revel in and adore human transformation and human potential. And I guess I would be considered a serial entrepreneur, though I focused most of my time around one business and helping other people start their businesses. I identify so much with the topic because I've run my company, the company that's been my base, been my livelihood for the past 24 years. Personal Care Solutions, which is operates under 3 different brand names and focusing on different brands.
Yeah.
And at different points in time, you're always, to be an entrepreneur is constantly to be facing fear. And personal, are wrestling with ourselves internally. So we've talked a lot about it. So I'm really excited to be here and talk to you.
Yeah. So what brought me to this place where I'm sitting here doing this podcast, which was not on my bucket list, but seemed like, as you and I talked, we talked about all the wisdom that comes along with running a business. And we hear a lot about the point of failure in a larger story, right? So how, some massively successful company, reached a point where they were struggling or they started out struggling or stuff like that, right? So it's a footnote in a bigger story. We don't often hear about what that feels like. What is the experience of failing and how we process it and how our formative experiences can dictate the decisions we make when we start to feel like we might be on that path. Right. And so for me, the staffing company that I'm in the process of winding down was started 5 years ago. And we raised other people's money, right? We raised 4.2 million of equity,
Amazing.
and about a million three of debt.
Okay.
And so having other people's money in there creates a whole other aspect of it as well. So, I didn't have a background in staffing when this company came about. I was actually approached with the idea and felt pretty strongly about what was different about this approach to staffing, which was that, helping individuals in low-skilled jobs not only gain employment, but also upskilling and assistance overcoming their barriers to work. So one of the biggest being that we saw transportation or childcare. A lot of people being, near homeless, meaning that they're living with other folks in other folks' homes, which creates all kinds of challenges. So I was really attracted to doing staffing differently. And this was originally 2018 when I was approached with the idea, and I took some time to think about it, work through it, and launched the company in 2019. And the first year was interesting because what I'll have to say about myself is I've always had a vision of what my career would look like and the kind of environments I'd be working in and the kind of people I would be working with. And I was working in a different environment with a different kind of personality than I was used to working with, right? So I came out of investment banking, I came out of consulting, I worked in private equity. So it's a different milieu, so to speak, right? It's a whole different vibe than what I was encountering with the staffing company. And I think that was kind of my first knock on my psyche, having to make that adjustment. And so, okay, this is all new. One of the things that we did was we partnered with workforce development programs. And our goal was to recruit from those programs. And, our goal with overcoming work barriers was that we would show companies that we were able to reduce their turnover. Turnover hits the bottom line. It's very expensive. Our value proposition was we can reduce your turnover in your entry-level positions. And for that, there was a bit of a premium for that, right? We're saving you money, and so it's going to cost you a little bit more than a traditional light industrial staffing company would charge you. And we got a whole lot of positive, oh yeah, that's excellent. This is what we need. And all these companies saying that they were behind it, right? Okay, so year one, 2019, I actually did have a lot of job orders.
Okay.
And what I found was the talent we were replacing was flaming out, like right away, even though we were recruiting from these workforce development programs. And so
established workforce development programs.
Established workforce development programs. Okay. And, I'll never forget my first major embarrassment in business was I had made all these promises to these companies about being able to reduce their turnover. And we were flaming out in 2 days, right? We were having people, no call, no show and all the stuff that staffing companies deal with. But that wasn't supposed to be us because we were recruiting from these workforce development programs. So
recruiting developed workforce.
Absolutely. Or so I thought, right?
Right.
And so what we ended up doing was we realized pretty quickly that we had to create our own training program. Right. So we ended up creating our own program. And I say all this to say it just got more expensive from this point to deliver the services that we were offering because now we've got a training program and it was 6 weeks long.
Of course.
And it was 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, and you got to pay people for that, right? You can't ask people to go through training for free. So now, all right, tick, 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 the cost of doing business is going up. So we finally start making some progress. We're placing people, they're sticking, we're more expensive. It's not, we're not getting as many job orders as I had hoped. And then COVID hits. Right. So, we started in 2019. The world shut down in March 2020. Right. And we went to zero in revenue. Right. And I thought that was the end of us. But COVID actually did something interesting. Because there was such a shortage of labor, we had no problem getting the rates that we required and getting companies to help cover transportation costs and other things. We boomed during that period. We had significant rapid growth during that period. But now, you know me, I'm an analytical person. I see that what has changed is the environment, right? The labor pool has changed. And that's not sustainable. I don't know how long that's going to last. Like, we don't know what the impacts are going to be. We're all sitting in the middle of this disaster. But I know if what is required for us to get to this level is some existential threat to the labor pool, this isn't a sustainable model. And I started to get real nervous at that point. So
what'd you do?
Yeah, I sort of subconsciously, I think, started to plan my exit.
Okay.
Because
internally.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it was top of mind at that point yet that I needed to move on, but I could feel a growing level of discomfort. And everything that went wrong felt like a threat, right? Mm-hmm. Anytime anything went wrong, because I'm now conscious that this business model doesn't really work, I started becoming very uncomfortable running this business. And so I thought, here's a solution. I'm going to hire a CEO to replace me. I'm going to bring in somebody who has workforce development experience.
Okay.
Because that person has to know better than I do how to connect these dots. Like,
remembering that, this isn't my world.
Not my world.
This is not my
Staffing,
world.
Workforce development, not my world. So, I'll become board chair. Let me find somebody. Right. I got to get out of Dodge, because what I did know was that I didn't want this failure on my watch. Right. And so if somebody could fix it, my thought was it would be somebody who had some experience in workforce development. But whatever the case is, if it didn't work, it wasn't failing on my watch. Like, I wasn't going to have that on my record. Right. That just didn't even fit with who I thought I was. Right. So I proceeded to, recruit someone, and I ended up leaving the business in September 2021.
Okay.
And at that point, things were still booming, right? But, I sort of knew it wasn't going to last.
And your role shifted.
I became board chair.
Board chair, okay.
I became board chair. And so I went and did my thing. I wrote my book. I did a whole bunch of things that I wanted to do. I went back and focused on my ethics company. I thought about my next venture. I was happy. I was just living my life, because whatever was going on, it wasn't going to happen on my watch. And I think I intentionally didn't check in as much as I should have, because I didn't want to get pulled back into what I subconsciously felt was going to be a failure.
Okay.
So I, did the thing and kept going. And then 2023 came around. And I had been getting calls from employees about, all the stuff that was going wrong. And I had started to get a little bit more engaged at the end of 2022 and talking to the CEO about what I saw was happening. And even with the change in the environment, so the COVID catastrophe or the COVID emergency was declared over, right, at the end of 2022. And I could see that the largest customer that this business had was going to start winding down. And I kept telling the CEO, I'm like, listen, you haven't brought in any new customers. You got to start, this is going to come to an end sooner rather than later.
Right.
And it just wasn't happening.
Right.
And, they called the board meeting and they said, hey, you're going to have to go back. Now we're at a point where the largest customer is exiting. There are only a handful of customers left. And as I'm looking at the numbers, the number of temps out working was just abysmal. So now I'm stepping into a situation that is an actual free fall, failing situation. I was triggered on all kinds of levels.
It was exactly what you were intending to avoid, right?
It was exactly what I was trying to get away from.
Right.
And here the universe was like, no, dear. No. Mm-mm. You're going to face your greatest fear here. And so I went back. I stepped back in, and initially I felt a little bit of elation, which was weird. I couldn't understand why. When I went back initially, I was really happy. And I thought, I'm going to pull this out of the fire. Like everything in me, I'm pulling this out of the fire, and, eye of the tiger, the whole nine. Like we're going to make this work, even though the business model did not work.
Right.
We're going to figure out how to make this work. And we worked hard, and the model was just too expensive.
Right.
We brought in new customers. We had more talent out working. It was just too expensive. We were hemorrhaging cash. And so this is, 2023. We're going through this, and I'm like left, right, sideways, every trick in the book, trying to figure out how to make this work. And my team they are doing everything they can. And we were just hemorrhaging cash. And so enter 2024, and I'm back to that feeling where anytime anything goes wrong, it feels like literally a threat on my life. Like it feels like an existential threat. And so I started doing some emotional work.
Okay, on yourself.
Yeah, because I realized I was in a state of being triggered.
Okay.
And I needed to get a better sense of what this was.
Okay.
Why was this so painful? Mm-hmm. Besides the fact that I was about to lose $6 million of other people's money. Why was this so painful?
Right. And we'll double back, because one of the questions I have is how things were different, having done things with the fear factor, having done things with other people's money versus having done them with your own. So that I was going to park that.
No, let's talk about that. And honestly, so I haven't had a failure on my own dime, but what I will say is the embarrassment and the shame that I felt were overwhelming.
Even in the reporting process, as you were talking about things, once you realize this dog doesn't hunt long term.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is what drove me to say, I need to figure out what's going on with me, because I knew that I had done everything that I could. I knew that my team had been working hard. I knew that, we weren't slacking off. So why was I so embarrassed? Why did I feel such deep shame about what was happening? Nobody who invested was poor, right? These were people who were not going to miss this money.
Right.
And so why did I feel so bad? And so after I started doing this emotional work, what I realized, I started looking back over my life experiences, and what I realized is that I had this deep, deep fear of failure. And it went all the way back to my educational experiences. And, I was a smart kid. I skipped grades, and I got that label early on as gifted.
Right.
And I had grownups in my life who would say things to me like, you're not that smart. You're not as smart as you.
Grownups that were close to you?
Family members. You're not as smart as people say you are. And so I felt this need as a child to never make a mistake, to never come up short, because I felt like people were rooting for me to fail. Like they just wanted to, they wanted to prove that they were right. And I didn't realize to what extent I had really internalized that. But then when I started looking at my choices over my adult life, I realized I had actually avoided some of the highest risk, highest reward or return scenarios that were placed in front of me, because the thought that I would swing for the fences and miss was unbearable. Wow. So I had taken quite often the safer route. Even with somebody said to me yesterday, I had a conversation with one of my investors, and I was expressing to him how embarrassed and how much shame I have felt about this.
Right.
And that, we got into the whole talk about fear of failure. And he was like, I don't think you have a fear of failure. I mean, you wouldn't have become an entrepreneur. And I said, well, actually, I can't work for anybody else. So the discomfort of working for other people is actually worse for me than the fear of failure. So let's just be clear.
That's very interesting.
That like it's painful for me to work in somebody else's structure. And so having the fear of failure doesn't mean that you won't take risk.
Right.
It just means that you calculate very carefully which risks you're going to take. Right. And I have had opportunities that were riskier, but that would have provided a far bigger return than anything I've experienced to date. Because I was afraid of what would happen if I failed. So yeah, it's been a fascinating experience for me unwinding that fear of failure and dealing with the embarrassment and the shame that I felt. And what I started to do was watch the news more carefully for other folks who were failing, other companies that weren't doing well. And, watching how their reaction. And there's this one in particular, this is a Chicago-based company, one in particular that they raised like $100 million over 10 years and they never were profitable. And the owner or the founder got tossed out a year before the company crashed. And I remember seeing him in cranes and on the news. And he's like, yeah, market forces. Basically, it ain't me, right?
Right.
It's everything but me. And I'm not saying that it was him,
right?
But what I admired about him was how he kept it focused on business. This is not personal.
Right.
This is business. Absolutely. Things don't work out sometimes. And yeah, it can hurt a lot and it can feel embarrassing. And I know there are people that I know who are like, yeah, she failed. Like, unfortunately, we all have those people
right.
somewhere in our sphere. Like, these are not friends, but somewhere in our sphere, there are always those people. And they're even former employees that I know are like, yeah, I knew she wasn't going to be able to do it. There are even those people who have commented to some of my employees who were recently let go that, that they knew that it wasn't going to work. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You were right. Right? You were right. Because it doesn't have that sting anymore.
Right.
Because I took a step back and I really started to explore, what did it mean to fail? And why is that so bad? Mm-hmm. And I came across a quote. I got a random email and I came across a quote that's attributed to the CEO of NVIDIA. That says, if you're going to be wildly successful, you need to develop a tolerance for failure. Mm-hmm. And I subscribe to that now, because winding down this business has opened up my perspective so much more.
In what ways?
So first of all, I'm doing things that I never would have done just because I didn't want the attention. I didn't want the whatever. Like, I'm sitting here talking to you about failure. Never would have happened. Miss Ivy doesn't fail, right? So never would have happened. And certainly admit to embarrassment and shame. What? No.
Right.
So to just being more open and more vulnerable.
Okay.
And being more open and more vulnerable have allowed me to think differently about the business that I still have, the business that I've been, sort of half launching for a number of years. And even there, why have I been half launching it? It's a swing for the fences opportunity. And so it's been in my mind since 2018. And I found all kinds of reasons to divert my attention from it because it's a swing for the fences opportunity. And I'm all in now. Like, I am running hard at getting this business launched. And because failing has freed me. I have now failed. Right. Mm-hmm. And it is free. The world didn't end. I didn't die. I didn't shrivel up from embarrassment. Nobody's even mad at me. Like, I hate that I had to let people go, but, even with that, we hugged it out, right? I mean, everybody, they appreciated being treated fairly, right? And they know that we worked hard to avoid this happening. And so the worst things that I thought would happen from failing didn't happen.
Right. And the worst thing, I want to go back a little bit, because I heard you say that you did some personal work, some deep work, some emotional work. And the worst thing that you were afraid of, that you got to of happening, really was something that was deeply embedded. Are you at liberty to share a little bit about that, or just give us some insights into how the thing that we think we're afraid of maybe isn't the thing we're actually afraid of?
Yeah. So what I came to conclude is it really was, I had built up a false persona for myself. And it was the thing that allowed me to get through, as a child, feeling not supported.
Okay.
And
to handle the haters, so to
to
speak.
handle the haters, right?
Haters,
I never shared any of this with my parents until recently.
Okay.
I just shared this stuff with my mother. She didn't know this was going on.
Okay.
That grown folks were saying this stuff to her child. She'd have beat them down.
You probably knew that, and you probably knew it,
right? So, but feeling alone in that, and feeling like my identity was this thing, was being this smart person who could figure everything out and who things worked out for. That had become my identity. And that's a dangerous thing. And even now, if you look at the psychological literature or whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of momentum behind the theory that you don't tell kids that they are smart. You admire what they do, but you don't make it who they are.
Who they are.
Right? And what I was afraid of was crumbling. Your psyche.
Whole identity.
Yeah, yes. Just crumbling because it's who I was, right? And so I think that only didn't happen because I started to really look back and to take the time to unpack what was going on there. And I think this is really important for entrepreneurs because, being an entrepreneur, you were making something out of nothing. Right. You were taking a no thing and you're turning it into a thing. That is magic. And not everybody can pull it off. Right. Frankly, not everybody wants to pull it off. Right. And that's fine. But it takes a certain amount of delusion to be able to think that you can do this thing and to put all of your energy and effort into doing this thing. And so I think as entrepreneurs, we have this personality, this psyche of, being doers, can do, can get it done. And when you don't get it done, who are you then?
That's right.
Who are you? And so my father was an entrepreneur and he had a stroke. He was an accountant and he ran an accounting business for a long time. He had a stroke and it was a pretty bad stroke and he wasn't able to work afterwards. And I remember him crying and saying to me, who am I if I can't do this work? Or who am I supposed to be? So I think it's really critical for founders, for entrepreneurs to really start to explore that aspect of themselves because ultimately it's probably holding you back from what you are supposed to be. Like whatever level of success you have, if you haven't dealt with these things in your psyche, you are probably not what you're supposed to be. So that's my story, but you have a story as well that I wanted to dive into.
Well, I feel like as you told yours, I'm like, I've had that story too. Even down to you saying, I shared with someone that I was doing the podcast with you, and then we're talking about the fear of failure. And it was by text. And the response was, you don't have a fear of failure. I just thought it was so interesting that I got the same comment back.
Yeah.
I'm like, who doesn't have a fear of failure? What changes is whether or not we're aware of it, right?
Right.
Whether or not we're aware of that we have a fear of failure.
And also what's worse for you, right? So there are certain things that are worse, right? For me, it's working for somebody else. That's worse for me than failing. So one of those things has to give.
I remember you saying to me, which I thought was hilarious. I said, I don't remember the question I asked, but it was about something. And you said, well, evidently most people are more afraid of being broke than you are, clearly.
Yes, I remember that conversation.
So it's like, what are you, just know what you're afraid of,
Just
right?
know what you're afraid of and know the order of magnitude of that fear. Yeah.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
tell us about, okay, so you're the hair whisperer.
I am.
Right. So
I am.
you and I know each other. Our kids went to school. We've known each other for a very long time. And you're my hairstylist. So, and I love you dearly. You're talented.
Thank you.
And have quite a history in the hair care industry.
That's right.
And so why don't you talk a little bit about Kali's background, and then I'm going to ask you a few questions about that fear of failure and how it might have tripped you up.
Okay, absolutely. I am online as the original hair whisperer, and that name came to be. I was running a business. I started a business. I started the business, the Image Studios. It was a what became name is called a personal branding company, but was an image communication firm, and it really just taught communication. And I started the company in 2000, and was all in for it, and simultaneously created a manuscript for a collection of salon horror stories, and pitched it to a literary agent. Sent out 3 literary agent queries, got 2 back. Yes, we're interested. And I just started this business, and I thought, I can't do both. Mm-hmm. I can't do both. If I do one, I won't be able to do the other. So I hid the fact that I was doing anything related to hair because I believed, I had a fear that it would crumble my business, this business that I was starting and that I was trying to start, this idea of this thing that didn't exist. And then 12 years later, I said, let me just, was going through a life change. And I'm like, let me just pick this book back up. Things aren't going. I had hired somebody to run my company. Interestingly, I didn't like how things were going. I thought, I don't know if I thought it was failing, but I knew it wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. So I hired, a manager to manage the business. And then I was going to go do something else. And the literary agent I reached out to after that said, this is a great book, but you're not the right person to tell the story because you don't know anything about hair. So for the 12 years between 2000 and 2012, Google had become, search engines had been the deciding factors of who you were. And the market knew nothing of me knowing anything about hair. So I had one identity that was, the word you used is I had created this, what was the word you used?
I don't know.
An identity, persona.
Okay.
Yes, I had created this whole persona of this executive, running this company and just an executive, just an executive running a business. And I had this yearning for paying attention to how hair was impacting people's lives. So I had to create an alias online. So I thought. And so the original hair whisperer became that, right? Because I thought that, going forward as me would then mean that I wasn't going to be taken seriously, that the business would suffer in some way.
So this publisher said, you can't be the one because you don't know anything about hair. Yes. But you have been doing hair since you were, what?
Yes.
10, 12?
Yes. I started doing hair. I started braiding hair when I was 9. By the time I was 12, my parents, people's parents were coming to my home to get their hair done. And my dad said, you have to start charging people something. And I remember crying and saying, no, they're not going to come if I charge them, and I charged them $5. But he was creating an entrepreneur in some way, showing me that, no, this is something that your time is valuable. And so I started a little cottage business in my parents' home, and they let me do it because I loved hair so much. It's all I wanted to do. And they said, if you keep your grades up, if you get A's, you get to keep doing hair. So from that point forward, I might have seen a B once or twice, but it was all, became my identity, was doing very well in school. And that was my past, to be able to do all I wanted to with hair. And then I studied chemical engineering because I wanted to formulate hair care products. I'm like, if I got to go to college, because they're like, you're going to college.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to just do hair. And, but I was tracked, same thing, because I had an aptitude for science and math. And so I study chemical engineering so I could formulate hair care products. I'm like, okay, well, I'll just study engineering so I can formulate hair care products. And that's what I went to school for.
And while you were getting that major degree, you opened a hair salon.
I did. But why? Because,
in college.
Yes. But it's so funny because it sounds luxurious now, or it sounds like, oh, that's amazing. But it would not have been a choice. I was doing hair. There's so many things related to your hair. So I was in school, not performing at the level that I had at my high school level. I was not doing as well at Carnegie Mellon studying chemical engineering as I had at Friendly Senior High School. And my parents, nobody in the family had ever gone to a university as competitive as CMU was, just couldn't understand it. And they just said, you need to be eating, sleeping, and studying. That's it. This hair stuff has to go. You need to stop doing hair. You're not serious about this degree program. And all I knew, so I did. I tried it for a semester, but I didn't look at my transcripts. I just looked back at my transcripts because I was trying something new. And the semester that I tried to stop doing hair, I almost failed out of school. How ironic is that?
More time.
I had more time. Burrowed down to just my engineering classes, was trying to do the just eat, sleep, breathe, and study. And I literally did fail out of school. I wound up on academic probation.
Yeah.
So my parents said, we were at an impasse. My parents, what I now understand is they felt like, hey, look, you had a full ride somewhere. You could do this dual thing you're trying to do somewhere else for way less money. And those are facts, right?
Yeah.
What my parents later said was, I interpreted them saying, we're not paying for you to go back to Carnegie Mellon. That's what they said. We're not paying for you to go back to CMU. And so I had committed to myself, I'm finishing this university. This is where I started. This is where I want to be. I'm finishing here. And I'd mapped a path that I want to get my license anyway. So I'll just get my license. I'll get my cosmetology license and I'll finance my own damn education. Mm-hmm. And what did you say? It's delusional?
Yeah.
We're a little, the mind of a... Yeah. So at 19, that's a decision I made. And I was like, we out.
Yeah.
And
so you kept doing hair and you stayed
I kept
in school.
doing hair. I did I found a group of investors that wanted to open a salon. We had an alignment. My one of the investors that was opening the salon made me present my transcripts because he was convinced I failed out of school. And I said, no, I actually didn't. My parents think I'm not committed to my education, so they're not paying for me to come back here. So he doubled down on his investment and said, hey, look, how much do I have to pay for you to stay in the city and be here to help us open the salon? So that was my first startup. I wrote the business plan and we opened DC Style Salon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with a group of 2 amazing investors, and that is how I paid for school.
And so fast forward a little bit, you came out of school and you started creating hair care products.
I did. I first went into product development for Dudley Products and then made a shift to Soft Sheen products here in Chicago. That's what brought me to Chicago. Soft Sheen had launched a line called Mazzani, and they were having some big issues with it. And they made me an offer to come and troubleshoot that line and reformulate their relaxer system. And I did. I loved it. Oh my gosh. I loved it. I was in the salon by night and in the lab by day. And they gave me checks.
Right. You got paid for that.
I got paid.
You got paid for that.
And I would feel guilty. I would pinch myself like, what are they giving me money for? This is fantastic.
So now one of the things I've always said to you, knowing your history and, Mazzani is like a huge relaxer brand, right? I mean, Black community, like we all
know who that is.
Got Mazzani, right?
Exactly.
And so, I remember saying to you, Khalid, why don't you have your own product line?
I know. Right?
Like there's so many hair care products out there that are put on the market by people who don't know anything about hair. Right. Not only have you been doing hair since you were 9, but you have a chemical engineering degree and you formulated hair care products, one of the most successful relaxer brands.
Right.
So I was like, why? Why? So talk about that and how the fear of failure played into that.
So My answer and you were not the first, right? So people would say, so when are you doing your product line? When do we get to have your product line? When are you? And I would just say, there's so many great products out here. And there are so many great products. If there's ever a void in the market, I'll do a product. And there was a void in the market, and I did create a product. It was a product called Your Oil. And I sold it only if you came to the Image Studios, back into the hairstyling studio, then you had an opportunity to buy the product. And so I had a line for why I had a narrative for why I wasn't going to do a product line. And then again, recently, I wound up maybe about 2 years ago, I was taking an existing product and I was, changing it. And I heard the voice, and it's like, you said, if there was ever a need for a new product, you would do it. And I at that point started to face, I think I'm scared. I'm scared. If I do a product, if I release a product, and what if nobody likes it? So with service, it's different, right? I ran service businesses. So I'm like, service, you can change it. What did you not like? It's all this intimacy. It's high touch. And, but you build a product and you put it out there and it fails. Oof. So, a year and a half ago, I was doing personal work. I had done all of this deep work around, fear, around, healing my inner child. And I think I just started to come in touch with what it felt like in my body to be afraid.
Yeah.
What it felt like in my body to be afraid.
Yeah.
And I'd recognize those feelings when I started talking about the product, when I started writing about the product, journaling about the product. I'd feel it. And so I knew, okay, this is you're nervous, right? You thought the answer was you're just not going to name the product your name, right? Yeah. But it was bigger than that. Mm-hmm. So I had to, at every turn I would stall. What are we? We're in 2024, and I just have samples of a product.
And so for you, the fear of failure was it prevented you from launching. It's like a failure to launch, right?
Literally.
So it blocked you from, and it's interesting because you said you had told yourself that if there were ever an opening in the market, a void in the market, you would create a product. How much do you think the fear of failure might have prevented you from seeing voids in the market?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely it prevented me from seeing voids in the market. That's what I recognize is that fear colors, it's the lens through which we see the world.
Yeah.
So it's literally the glasses that will, it's like polarized sunshades. So there's certain things that just don't get in because it's like, no, that you notice that. You're going to have a call to action.
Right. Right.
Right. Will. Yeah. So absolutely. Absolutely. And I not only do I see that I didn't lose the desire to launch things. I've helped people launch 7 different companies.
Right.
Right. So it was that I needed enough distance for it to be, I want to launch, but I don't want it to be, if it goes wrong,
right.
It's not destroying my identity.
Right. Right.
Right. So I poured my launch energies into other endeavors, other people's ideas. I still do, right? That's still, I love that. I love helping other people bring ideas. So I think that's the entrepreneurial spirit. We're always helping other people, but I wasn't doing my own most natural thing because most natural.
And so what do you think got you over that hump to now where you've developed a product, You've got product samples, and soon in the near future you'll have a product.
And I'm excited about shipping them out. I'm actually excited. I think it was the personal work. I really do.
Yeah.
I attribute it to 2 things. One is, and they're not independent of each other. One is EMDR therapy, tapping, just really getting in touch with my emotions and my body and recognizing when I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Digging back into the narratives, like how much of my identity was tied to doing things that my parents understood.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much of my identity was just tied to them understanding what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is my circle, right? So I have always been very intentional about keeping really brilliant people around me, not unlike you.
Mm-hmm.
And what you all kept saying is, what the heck?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and you wouldn't necessarily let up. You'd bring it up again, and eventually I'm kind of like, all right, Kali. So I think those two things had to coalesce.
Yeah.
And age, and hopefully, I hope this doesn't happen for other people, but I'm 54.
Mm-hmm.
So I think also getting to the point where it's like, you're going to die one day.
Yeah.
You're going to die one day.
Yeah.
And what you have been afraid of is going to be what dictates your legacy.
Yeah.
I think those factors, I think.
The life you don't live because of that fear, right? And especially entrepreneurship is such a spiritual journey,
It is
right?
such a spiritual journey.
It's your business is a mirror. It really reflects back to you all that stuff that you are and aren't, right? And it doesn't lie. Whether or not you choose to see the image that it's reflecting back to you is one thing.
Absolutely.
But you can measure what's going on in your psyche by what's going on in your business. Absolutely. And how people are relating to each other and what is or isn't happening. And it's hard to take a look at that and keep that persona. Right. Keep that very fragile vision of who you thought you were. Right. And so one of them has to give. Either you keep the persona and you don't see it clearly, or you see it clearly and the persona has to go. And so what I think is really interesting is you mentioned EMDR. That's exactly what got me over the hump. Right. So EMDR was an eye movement desensitization something. It's a form of therapy,
yes.
EMDR.
Yes.
I had many years ago, I had tried talk therapy after a bad relationship and that didn't work for me. Like I just, I can talk circles around most people. So that didn't work for me.
Exactly.
But EMDR is a very specific type of therapy. And I did 5 sessions and accomplished more in understanding what was going on for me than anything else that I've done. And you also mentioned tapping. After EMDR, I came across tapping. And so tapping, EFT, the emotional freedom technique, is something you can do for yourself, which is what I really liked about it, right? And I found that to be so helpful to me that I went for certification in tapping. So I could help other people, teach other people, and coach other people with it. So I think it's just critical that for our own success, happiness, health, and all those things as entrepreneurs, as founders, as whatever, really releasing that baggage.
That's right. And you mentioned something about health. You mentioned that the business is a mirror, and we deal with the things, or we give up the persona. And I think there's another, or we get sick.
Yeah.
Or we get sick. And it stays in our bodies and it becomes something else. I think that's another element is that the work of working things out entrepreneurially has been a healing process for me.
Yeah.
I mean, has really been a physical healing process for me.
Yeah. There's a book, it was out many years ago, called The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever you're feeling and experiencing is getting stored right in your physical body, and it's going to manifest in some way. So it's really important. But so these are 2 different manifestations of the fear of failure.
Right. I didn't start.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yours
I wasn't starting.
Not starting, and mine was. It's just not going to fail on my watch. let somebody else do this, and ultimately. The fear of failure can manifest in different ways for different people.
Right.
And I think what I want our listeners to think about is how that might be manifesting for them.
Right.
And what might that be holding you back from? Because the thing I can say is having gone through this, I feel freer now and more powerful and empowered now than I have felt at any point in my professional career.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Having had this failure. And when you and I were first talking about this, you mentioned this statistic that the most successful entrepreneurs have something like 4 failed businesses
under their belt.
Before they get to that success.
Exactly.
So, it's a thing that we run from and we hide from and we're terrified of. And yet it's really a stepping stone to, where we want to be, where we're trying to go.
Right.
And I think it's important for people to understand that and to accept it and to embrace it. You really haven't failed until you stop.
Right. It's a process. How much of what we do reflexively without awareness is based on our desire to control, like what we don't get to control, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would say for me, a lot. A lot. Some people think I'm a control freak, Kali. Is that surprising to you? It kind of surprises me that they think that. But no, I think a lot of what I do is influenced by what I can control. And it is demonstrated in this situation because my desire to exit when I did, when the business was going up, had to do with I can control this point here. I can hand off this great business.
Right. And it fit your identity.
Right. And it fit this is what I can control. What comes after this, I can't control because I know that there's a misalignment in the business model and what companies are willing to pay. The market and the model are not aligned. And I can't control how that plays out. And I don't know how to fix it, that was hard for me to even admit to myself, like, I don't know how to fix this. So let me bring in somebody who might have a better clue because they've, been in workforce development. But to your question, a lot of, I can say for me, a lot of it is driven by what I can control.
Well, and what's interesting too is this piece, right? Because we talk a lot about faith and so what wasn't able to be controlled, it didn't matter. You wound up right back into the situation, right? Back into so I'm learning from that. So I'm thinking, okay, Kali, you're right. You're gonna release this product, and you don't get to control what happens with the product on either side. So let's go with that piece. Is it could be wildly successful, and there's a bit of like, okay, then what happens? Does that mean being on TV? What does that mean? On either side, it's like, boxed in by not being able to control the situation, but it's not in our control. Yeah. Like it's not in our, you specifically were like, I'm going to control this.
Right.
And the universe was like, and here we are.
Right. Exactly.
So I'm learning from that, like, sweetheart, you are not, you're going to walk this out.
Right.
And you're going to wind up exactly where you need to be.
Right.
And
what you can control is how you respond.
Right.
Right. Responsibility.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
You can control how you respond to what's happening. And that's something I'm becoming more comfortable in, which is why I took a step back and said, I need to focus on why am I responding this way?
Right.
Why am I feeling this? I don't like to have negative vibes. Bad vibes. Like, I'm not one of those people, I can't stay mad.
Right.
I will get mad and it's gone 2 minutes later because I just don't. That just feels like a whole lot for me. And so I was constantly being triggered and just was asking myself, how is this my life? How is this my life? Right? How is this my life? Right? And when you're asking this question repeatedly, it's time to take a step back and figure out what exactly is going on here. Right?
Well, and what's interesting is you're asking, how is this my life? How much have you mined through all of the amazingness that happened with this business that failed?
Yeah.
Right?
And so,
right? Because while we're busy, right? I'm hearing that too. While you're busy trying to do this, all of this amazing stuff is happening that you're not necessarily seeing. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So you and I were talking recently, and I was saying I've only, in the very, very recent past, I've only recently started looking at what actually did we accomplish, right? This business is failing or has failed. Or it'll be completely wound down by December 31st. What have we done? Right. And so I started looking back over the financials for the company. And, the company's not that old. I mean, basically we had, 4 full years operating, and, we generated over 10 million of revenue. We employed almost 1,000 people. We, provided job coaching and therapy and assistance with housing and assistance with childcare. We spent so much money on transportation, making sure people could get to and from work. I mean, we did a lot of good. And I was sharing with you, when I started looking over this, I almost cried because I've been so focused on this business has failed. And I've been so focused on unburdening myself from my personal fear of failure that I had not looked at what had been accomplished during this time. For a company whose business model didn't match the market, we did an awful lot
of good.
Yeah, we
for
did
an
an
awful lot of
awful
people.
lot.
Yes.
So it's important, as you pointed out, to really look at, even in failure, what did you accomplish? What have you been able to accomplish? So yeah, that was a big eye opener for me. So we've had an interesting conversation about the fear of failure here. I think for the people who will listen to and watch this, I think what I would like for them to take away from it is that it's okay to admit that we have a weakness, and that weakness could be fear of failure for them, or it could be something else.
Right.
But it's empowering to own whatever that weakness is, because that's the first step to overcoming it. And one of the things that I learned in my EFT training, one of the things they would say is, you can't change something until you accept it exactly the way that it is.
Exactly the way
Right?
it is. Exactly.
You've got to accept it first, fully, before you can change it. And it makes so much sense, because until you are realistic about the circumstances, you can't hope to change it. You can't attack the cause and core of what it might be, because you haven't fully embraced and understood it.
That's right. It still owns you.
It still owns you. Yes.
We're not free. We're not free until we've done that piece. And it's almost, I actually say, even love into it. It's
love
not
into it. I like that.
Acceptance is a word that I have had a difficult time understanding. Maybe it's control. Acceptance has been tough, but love is easier for me to actually take the part that I don't like, the part that I'm like, oh, why do I not do that? Or why do I do that? And try to say, but can you love that part first? Can you start with embracing it? Yeah. That gets to it for me.
I like that.
That really, that really, really gets to it for me, and helps me to be able to become free. It's the beginning of being able to be free from a thing that just binds. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about this series, and I thank you so much for sitting down and talking to me. The upcoming episodes, the thing that I've told you, I'm not interested in just putting the gory, gooey stuff out there and being like, hey, this was awful, right? But I also want to empower people to take that next step. So as we move forward, we'll be talking to a therapist who will talk about the psychology of the fear of failure and what you can do to start to overcome that process. We'll be talking to a coach, an executive coach, about what that looks like in leadership when you're managing your team. Because I had to reflect on, what was I transmitting to my team?
Right.
Because the people who work for you are picking up on what you're putting out, whether you know it or not. Right. So what am I transmitting to them? So we'll learn more about how you can nullify that in the way that you're managing your company. We'll talk about when co-founders don't get along, right? I've got a story there too. So we've got a lot of these. There are a lot of failure factors.
There's a lot of failure factors. Including, like, how do you even know when you failed?
How do you know?
When is it time to accept defeat?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. We can stay at the party too long. Right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so, the goal is just to help people like us, business owners who have staked their lives, their livelihoods, and that of their families on some enterprise, some entity being successful. And we can all use a little bit of a boost, a hack to get to the next level. Yeah, and to know we're not alone. To know that it hurts. It's painful, but it can also be quite amazingly freeing.
Exactly.
When you get past it.
Exactly.
So any last words, any last thoughts?
No, I mean, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to unpack this with you and to be a part of this. I mean, it was genius. It's just absolutely genius. I'm like, why does nobody talk about this?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I'm hoping there's, please, I'll be watching and I would love to be back. How do you fail? What's the right, teach us how to fail.
How to fail.
Teach us how to fail.
Fail forward.
Fail forward.
Fail
and you hear
forward.
it. Well, I hear it all the time.
Right. But how do you do that? How do you do
that?
Yeah.
Right? I hear it all the time. Fail forward. Okay. Fail fast.
Yeah.
You can hear that.
Yeah.
Fail fast. But what exactly does that mean? And it could be my neurodiverse brain. It's not me. I'm kind of like, okay, is there a framework?
It's not you. There is a skill to failing forward, and the anatomy of failure is going to be tackling that so that we all learn how to fail forward.
Thank you.
Not just the fortunate few, because everybody fails. We just don't necessarily see it or know about it, right? So
thank you.
Thank you for being here. That's it for this first episode of Anatomy of Failure. I hope today's conversation helped you to see that the fear of failure isn't just a personal weakness. It's a common barrier that can influence every decision we make as entrepreneurs. By dissecting what went wrong, we've started to uncover how acknowledging and working through this fear can free us to take bigger, smarter risks. Be sure to listen to next week's episode. I'll be talking to an expert who will help us understand the psychology behind the fear of failure and how you can work to overcome it so that it doesn't hold you or your business back. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. You can subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and through my website, anatomyoffailurepodcast.com. Subscribers through my website can get access to the video version of this podcast and an incredible array of resources like tools that support implementing what you learn from each podcast episode, as well as access to webinars, online courses, live sessions, bonus episodes, and so much more, including a surprise welcome gift. Tune in each week. We'll continue to examine the factors that lead to failure so that together we can learn how to get it right. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.